to our expert. Thank you so much, Karla, and I'm so sorry I made you get up so very horribly early over there in Australia, but I'm really, really grateful. So I was very, very keen to meet you anyway. And so what we're going to start with is Voice for Kids. Just tell us a little bit about what Voice for Kids is.
Okay, so I started Voice for Kids due to the fact of being a child divorced myself. So at the age of 9, my parents separated, and for the next 17 years, I pretty much struggled with the effects of my parents' divorce. I didn't have much communication. There was not a conversation after the separation. So it was pretty much a build up and explosion by the age of 17 for me. What I realized is when I went to look for help for myself, I really had to go and look. There's a lot of help I found for parents and what they were going through, but I couldn't find anyone that connected with me and what I was going through myself. And I discovered that I had a lot of gems and good information and tools I could give parents to help them understand how we feel as children and what we're going through. And I really feel that from the children's heart and from the actual mouth of the child, it actually brings a lot more value to how children are feeling. Sometimes I've spoken to a lot of parents and they're not always interested in the specialist. Sometimes they want to hear the raw and honest truth of how children feel. And I decided then to write 2 books, Please Don't Go and Is It My Fault? And I launched them in 2003 with Voice for Kids. And I've been advocating for the last 20 years, just being there for separated parents, helping them amicably co-parent in the best interest of children, giving them an understanding of what children are going through, the mindset of the child, and helping them understand that when you put children first in a separation, it actually is a win-win for all. And the parents will actually find that they'll bring up still a well-rounded child if they decide to put the children ahead of their own emotions and feelings.
Do you agree, Karla, that although there's a sort of general assumption that, oh, of course, people put their children first, in reality, we don't. We are so caught up with, especially if it's acrimonious, like some of those stories earlier, that the children get completely forgotten in all of this, and of all ages as well. But it's a delicate area, isn't it? So what's your sort of strategy, if you like, for helping parents to get over the inevitable guilt and realise what harm they're doing, and help them to see things differently?
I just feel that, like, if parents were to look at the situation of usually where they're at, there's so much. Like I always say to parents, you can't help your child until you help yourself first. So a broken vessel can't help a broken vessel. So when, if your child comes to you for information, if you are still in a place of hurt and pain, how can you be there to support your child? It's very important to understand that parents have to get that self-help themselves. They have to change their mindset. They have to see things from a different perspective. And sometimes the only way to do that is to get that counselling yourself. But if you leave yourself in that bitter place of living in your past, you can't see a future forward even for your children. So they're living in a hope that they're going to have still a great life moving forward, but sometimes they're on the coattails of where your emotions are. And usually you're not in that good perspective to help them. So I'm always trying to guide parents to say, the only way you're going to be able to look forward and a good explanation I give is, the front windscreen of a car is a lot bigger and brighter. But if you're ever looking in the revision mirror, forever looking at the past, which is only a small mirror, you're going to be living in a very dark place. And for your children, they need hope. They need to know that there is still a good future for them. And the important thing for them is to have both parents in their life. They equally love both parents. They don't automatically go, oh, I just want to live with mum, I want to live with dad. They usually are stuck in that middle choice of not really wanting to choose. So my advice always is to parents that if you feel there is no hope, it's just because sometimes you're putting yourself in a place of not actually taking even yourself to a place of healing yourself and that peaceful place where you can see that there is a light to move forward. And that usually is because some people sadly choose to still live in the bitterness of what took place, whether it was an affair, whatever it was that took place. They don't want to let go of that. There's a fear to let go of that. And when they let go of it, sometimes they feel like they're excusing it. But if you see the bigger picture of why the children need you to, is because they need that hope and light to know that everything's still going to be okay.
Everything you're saying is music to my ears, especially the idea of a choice, because it's so empowering to go, I don't choose to let bitterness and anger be my driving force anymore. I'm making a different choice. And yet culturally, that in the UK, that can be, it's not an easy transition for people. I imagine it's not much different in Australia. How do you approach that? Obviously you've got the books. What other tools do you use to support people?
So I've just released a new online course called How to Reconnect with Your Child After Your Separation. And this is a 12-hour course full of audio and videos. And basically what I've done in this course, because I've noticed there's a lot of courses out there, but I really wanted to give parents the insight of how children feel in every area. So whether it's about the handover, whether it's about communicating with them, how children feel, the mindset of a child, blending families, basically how to introduce a step parent. There's so many different topics, and I think I've got over 34 topics that I talk about. And the modules are communication, parents and step parents, and how to move forward. And in those modules, those actual different topics, I talk about the problem first. So if it's the handover, I talk about the problems I feel parents do when they do hand over children, what they're saying to the child prior, why they're setting them up for an emotional ride sometimes, and all those things that I feel they handle the wrong way. I then do a video on myself just saying, look, this is how it was for me, the handover. And then I talk about an audio with the solutions and the better way to handle that situation. Because I think parents need to recognize the problem, but they also need the tool of the solution. You can't just leave them hanging with the problem. And I really felt that this course, and it can be completed probably in 2 weeks if they did an hour a day, was really important because parents need information now. They need it urgently. They don't need to be dragging this situation on with their children while they're going through court or whatever they're doing. They need to be educating themselves now on how to help their children through this ride. And this is something they can do in the comfort of their own home. So besides doing my ebooks and paperback books, I just thought a relaxed course that they can do in the comfort of their home, educate themselves, and they can pre-educate themselves. So they've only just separated. They can see all the different topics I'm talking about and have the information now, so when those topics arise, they're actually prepared.
And do you do one-to-one work with people as well,
Yes,
online?
yes,
I'm
yes. So I
imagining
also do one.
I imagine you know how to use Zoom now, as we all do.
Yeah, I use Zoom a lot.
And I imagine also that you work internationally, because it doesn't matter whether you're in Australia, America, or the UK. The stresses and struggles of trying to co-parent are exactly the same, aren't they? Really?
Yeah. Oh, but look, I've said this for years to people. This is a global issue. There's children hurting everywhere. It's a square peg in a round hole. It's a topic that people don't want to talk about, but they need to talk about. If you look at the destruction of what many children are going through in life in their adulthood, a majority of the time it comes from a broken home, a missing parent in some way. Usually, sometimes it's a father, a significant father present in the home, things like that. So it's a really big issue, and I think it's probably getting worse at the moment due to the state of what's going on in the world. There's a lot more domestic violence. There's a lot more things going on for children being stuck in homes. There's broken marriages happening everywhere, even more so now due to this COVID situation. So it's been, I believe, yeah, it's something it's actually only rising, which is quite sad. But I just think parents need education, and I do believe they're crying out for it, but they're not sure where to get it sometimes.
We don't get taught how to parent at school, as my mother always used to say, and she's so right. But these are opportunities to sometimes I think parents who've actively co-parent become much better parents than they would have done if they were just together and not really thinking about it, because bringing up children is a bit of an art form, which I'm still learning. Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Carla, and I'm really looking forward to hearing a shared story with you a little bit later.
no problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing, and it's so great to hear straight talking. It is a difficult thing. It's so easy to feel guilty. I've been there, but that doesn't help your children. There's skills you can learn, understanding, educate yourself, Your children don't have to suffer because of your divorce. Even if the other parent is making it difficult, that's no excuse. And welcome again, deja vu, Karla. I just wanted to say, Erica in England has just said, I tell my children it's my job to take care of you, and it's my job to take care of me. Wise words as always from Erica, and completely what you were just saying, Karla. So, shared story, what would you like to share with us?
Okay, I think the story I will share it's quite an important one. It's impacting, and a lot of people have actually asked me to share this before. And it's about when children are caught in the middle. And I was 17 at this stage. I was still living with my father at this time, and he was engaged. So I was about to have a stepmother. And up until this point, there was never any discussion of me not being able to talk about my mother or my father to each other. So it didn't seem to be a problem. Until this one day, I was actually taken to the kitchen and sat down, and I was asked by my father to not mention my mother's name in the house anymore. And when this moment happened for me as a child, it actually took me back to the 9-year-old little girl when my parents separated. So when I was 9 and my parents told me they were separated, I pretty much froze because in that moment, my parents never fought before they separated. So for me, it was quite a shock that my parents separated. There wasn't any arguments. So it put me in a state of shock. So all of a sudden I'm 17 years old and I feel like I'm reliving the same shock, which is being asked something or being told something that I'm not prepared for. And I remember in that moment thinking to myself, why would my father be asking me to deny my mother? Like, why would he suddenly be not wanting me to talk about her? This has never been asked before. And I realised in that moment, because I was 17, but children grow up very fast when they go through divorce. Their maturity, I feel, and their brain grows faster because we try to work things out ourselves. I feel like I was a lot older in my head, and I'd worked out in that moment that I feel that this request actually came from my stepmother, not from my dad. That it was this insecurity that she had, and due to that insecurity that she had, she'd asked of my father, because now they're engaged, she was secure in his love, that she could ask such a thing of him to then ask me. So in that moment, I remember turning and just saying, okay, because I didn't know what to say. I was scared of my dad at the time. And I didn't know if I did react and say, why you asked me such a thing, what would happen to me? So I just said, okay. But walking away from the kitchen that day, because they proceeded to tell me that my stepmother's children agree as well. They won't talk about their other father. So it was like, you need to agree with everyone else. This is the decision we've made. I remember walking to my bedroom and just crying and ringing my mother and saying, I can't live here anymore. And my mother said, what's happened? And I said, I'm not allowed to talk about you anymore. I can't mention your name anymore. And my mother was quite shocked because this had never been an issue before. And I thought to myself, maybe it's when my mother pulls up to pick me up that she doesn't like, my stepmother doesn't like seeing my mother. And there's all these silly insecurities that I thought, because my parents separated, I was 9, I was now 17 years old. It can't be an insecurity my dad's got. It's a long time later on. He dated a few ladies even before this lady. So it got to the point where I asked my mum, can I go and live with her? And when I did finally tell my dad, I think it was the next day, I was very scared. It's very hard to be a child of divorce and to walk up to a parent that you're scared of and tell them you want to leave them to live with another parent. It's not a position you even want to be put in. But I felt I had no choice, because I felt like, to deny my mother was wrong. I didn't feel that a child should have to do that. I was at that mature age. I mean, I'm grateful that I was at that age, because I hear of little children all the time that are told to deny another parent, and they are so young they don't understand that it's wrong. They just get basically controlled in the way to do it, to think that it's normal, to think that they have to do it. They get persuaded and coerced. And for me, I was old enough to know that that was a wrong thing to be asked of. But the sad thing was, when I left and went to live with my mum, I then lost my father in return, because the connection between him dwindled and pretty much came to a place where I was writing letters to say to him, the reason I'm not happy is because you asked such a thing of me. But it came to a place where they were denying that it was ever asked. And that's what was really difficult for me as a child, because I was put in the middle of a statement that should never have been asked. And then I looked like the bad person for moving away from them.
That's such a painful story. When you see that happening, how can you empower the elder children, and also empower the other parent, because
Mm.
at that time they probably just didn't really know what to do. In hindsight, I mean, obviously not ask you in the first place, but when it
Yeah.
does happen, what kind of strategies have you found can be helpful?
Well, I was only saying this to someone the other day who was asking me about this story. I said it was when I made the comment to my dad, and I said, "Okay." I remember my head saying to me, "Why are you even saying that?" My brain was arguing with myself. You should, And I think, as I said, it was the fear that I had of my dad that held me back. But I'd really like to encourage teenagers that you have a voice and you do have the right to speak up. And it doesn't have to be said in a way that's malice. It can just be, I mean, it can even be a question of, like in my situation, if I was to go back, um, I wish I would have said something like, Dad, can I ask you, all this time, you've never had a problem with mum. Why now? Why now? I think they need to explain to us why. They need to answer for a question that they're asking us. And I think children need to be in a place that they're brave enough to know that it's okay to ask. And it's okay for you to also say, I don't personally feel that this is right what you're asking me. We have a right to also to actually have a voice and say that we don't necessarily agree with it. And if it comes to that place where you feel to be with the other parent, and you're able to, the other parent might just have to accept that due to the question they've asked. As I said, for me, I was too emotional because I hadn't dealt with anything by this stage. I hadn't had any counselling. So I was still very, very raw for my parents' separation at 9. That was the problem. I hadn't had any counselling, and the discussion of my parents' separation had never been talked about. So I was still the little girl at 9 at 17. But I think if children have had counselling and they're brave enough, it's okay to step up and say, I don't agree. Why are you asking me this? And do I get a say in this also because of my feelings? And I don't want to deny you, and I don't want to deny my mother. And I'd never want to be put in this position to have to say this about yourself, because I think my dad never reversed it to see what this would be like if it was done to him. And I always say to people all the time, before you say something, you should reverse it and see what it's like to be done to yourself, before you ask a child.
Do you agree that in situations like that, what might help as well is to use mediation, family mediation, because there are specialised mediators who work
Yeah.
specifically with families, children, grandparents, and help resolve. And I think with the step parenting side, it is so challenging to be a step parent,
Um,
and if someone's not that intuitive a parent, they can, yeah, as you say, get defensive and ask things that actually are completely unacceptable, but they don't realise. And so, do you think that mediation can help take some of the pressure off the child? At least the teenager or even younger child can be encouraging the family to do family therapy together to,
mm,
let's sort this out and let's come to
yeah.
a plan here, because it's just going to be very difficult otherwise to comply.
Yeah.
It's a lot to put on a child's shoulders, though, isn't it? But
Oh,
somebody, I just think the more children are empowered to go, hey, stop fighting, go and I want them to tell their parents about the best way to divorce act, for example. I want them to recommend mediation, and the more education they have, the better, because they're the ones who pay the biggest price, aren't they?
yeah. Oh, look, I highly recommend mediation, and I highly recommend it over court if you can avoid it, because I really feel that sometimes children are just dragged through the family court. I mean, I wasn't dragged through the family court, thank goodness. I went through enough. I'd hate to think of what it would be like to be dragged through the family court. I've seen so many children's lives destroyed because of being dragged through 5, 6, 7 years of court. But I truly believe that mediation is the way. And there's some wonderful services out there that you hear of, and they'll interview the child and ask the child how they're feeling first, open that information up, and then give that information to the parents. The mediator will give that information and say, well, we've talked to your child, and this is how your child feels. They're caught in the middle. They love you both. They don't want to have to choose. They want you to be amicable. They want you to get along. They want to see you both. And they're all the things that they need to hear. They don't want to be put in that position. They were brought into the world by them, so they want to
Yeah.
be with them, and they just need to understand, that sometimes there's always one stubborn parent I find that just won't go to that mediation, and that's when it comes to being selfless over selfish, and actually putting the children first, and understand that mediation is not necessarily walking in because you're trying to make things better with your ex. It's for the sake of your child. And that when you put your child first, you'll actually get a better relationship with the ex. And I say to people all the time, it's like a business. You have this asset, you have this child, and this asset's not going away. As much as you might try and, like we have a business, you break up, you sell the business, and off you go with your two halves, you're still going to have an asset. And that asset needs to be valued and looked after, so that that child's not brought up to think that they're a broken vessel. They can grow up to feel that they're loved by still two people. They might be in two different homes, but they can have that equalness there, and understand there that they'll understand there's probably still a little bit of turmoil between the parents, but they get along. They're civil for their sake, and that's really all I needed. Was my mum was quite civil. My dad was very quiet, but then all of a sudden, when the stepmother came in, it became very different, and that's where I think step parents have to learn their place. They're there to support the father of the child or the mother of the child. They just need to be a support, but the main parents, the biological parents, need to be the two that work together, and that child will learn to grow to love that step parent if they just are a friend at the beginning. They only need to be a friend. They don't need to be another mother or father.
Brilliant advice. Thank you so much for sharing that story as well.
No
And I
problem.
hope to have you on the show again soon. Bye for now.
No problem. Thank you. Thanks, Susie.